and welcome to That's Mental Mate. I'm joined today by old neighbour, a fellow LJMU alumni. I can't bring myself to say your actual name.
Yeah,
RF, Rachel Frazer.
there we go. You did it.
Anyone that doesn't know, we lived in Apollo Court together in uni halls, but there was already a Rachel in our flat. So whenever we got introduced to the flat next door, I just flat out was like, no, it's too much. So RF came about on a drunken night. I'm sure it's weird you call me Brad, not BC as well.
No, and I remember whenever the first night you called me as well, you shouted through my bedroom door. I was half asleep and you were half cut and you were just screaming RF and I was like, oh,
I think I
that's
was
me.
half cut. I think I was full cut
You were full cut.
and a bit more in them days.
Like, yeah, I can remember those days very well.
So we start every podcast asking how you doing.
Yeah, I'm quite good at the minute. A bit tired, but good. Yeah, busy, super busy, lots going on and family life and work and other things. So, but I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I
Busy
hope
being a
you're
mama.
very busy being a mama. I thought maybe like when I started this job that I'd be far too busy and I would feel like I didn't have a second, but in actual fact it feels like I'm just as busy. It's not added to my pile because I've essentially managed my time a little bit better than perhaps I did before mum life or before I was working full time and had Aria. But I think that's one of the things that as a mum you worry about most anyway, is that like time, sort of like how do I manage my time appropriately where I'm not like neglecting my child and neglecting my job and neglecting myself, which it takes a long time to get that balance. To be perfectly honest, like it's taken, I'm still not sure if I'm doing it right, but I remember like when I first had her, I was like, I can't even brush my hair. Like I don't even have time to brush my hair every morning. Like, because she was crying and I was trying to get myself sorted. And then while she wasn't crying, because I was with her and then she'd start crying as soon as, and it was quite overwhelming, especially not having family here in good old England. But
Yeah. No, well, my sister's just had a wee baby there, 3 month old. But she has good family around her. Like she's just moved maybe about 5 minutes away in a car. But he's wee shite. He doesn't like being sitting down. He doesn't like sitting down. So you just cry and you
yeah,
pick him up and carry him around and you put him down. It's not even a cry. It's like a me,
like a little moan.
like a wee me.
Oh,
And then you lift him up and it's grand. He's
oh.
100%.
Babies still think they're part of their mums until they're like, I think is it 6 months or a year, and then it actually takes them until they're like 7 years old to realize that. Like whenever I ask Aria, "What have you been doing today at school?" she'd be like any other child, nothing, or I don't know, but it's because in their heads they think you've seen what they've been doing all day already. Automatically their brains just think you know what they do 24/7 anyway. That's cute though. So Uncle Brad,
Yeah, Uncle Brad.
Uncle BC.
And I actually like him
Oh,
most
do
of
you
most of
actually
the time.
like?
I know.
Actually,
Even though I just shared on Instagram the Cruella de Vil thing
oh
about
yeah, I saw that.
being more interested in puppies and babies and accidents happen. And should have seen the video. I'll have to send you the video after of them telling me on Christmas Day.
Oh
Me and
yeah,
my brother were out the night before. We were well on. So obviously, but she's 26 now, but she's like in at 6:30 in the morning, like away like right man up, and you're like, Cody, you're 20, whatever now. But she came in, it's very early. We went down, opened her presents. Me and my brother went back to bed. And then she came in a couple of hours later and was like, right, mom, down for a family photo. And I was like, I'm in my bed. She was like, no, but we need a family photo now. And I was like, right. And then I just rolled over and went back to sleep. And then she came in a while later. Come on, get on, hurry up, hurry up. And I was like, why? What's the rush? And then my brother-in-law actually shouted me up. And I was like, right, why is he shouting me? So I came down and was like, what's the rush here? What's going on? And I had no idea. And they said, oh, we're going to Adzie's granny's or something, my brother-in-law's granny. So I went, right, okay, fair enough. So we were collected then for a photo, and he was taking the photo, but it was a video, and he goes, 3, 2, 1, Cody's pregnant. And I was like, you can see me going like grimacing, being like, that's a weird kind of thing to say. Like I thought he was kind of saying like my granny's a turtle, or they say my granny's a turtle or cheese or whatever. I was like, why is he saying that? And then you can see me recoil from her as it starts to sink in. I'm like, oh,
She's
but
pregnant. She's not diseased.
I know that was the whole joke. Like everyone kept laughing at that.
That's so
I
good.
suppose we're talking about this. We should probably let the listeners know that you studied early year and childhood studies, wasn't it?
So
Early.
I did. It was education in early years, and then I
Yeah.
went on and did a psychology masters.
Yeah.
That was my jam because I originally wanted to teach, and then I kind of got to the point where I got onto the PGCE, and then was like, oh, actually, no, thank you,
Yeah.
not right now. And then while I was writing my thesis, I found out I was expecting area, so I was like, oh, okay, well,
Having
don't
a
know
bit.
what I'm going to do for a little while. So I was quite lucky with James's job that I could be at home for the first couple of years, didn't have to work at all, which was really, which I know is a privilege, but it was hard. Like it was really lonely. Um, my family's obviously in Northern Ireland. We're in England, in Lancashire, but James's family are 4 hours away in Bristol. So we had absolutely no one. We were completely isolated and on our own. And I was just by some unlucky chance ended up developing an IBD called ulcerative colitis. It's like similar to Crohn's disease. While I was pregnant with Aria, so they didn't know what was wrong with me until she was about 4.5, 5 months old. So for the first kind of 4 months, I wasn't well enough to like leave the house without anyone with me in Aria. So I was essentially isolated for like her first 4 months. Couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything on my own, couldn't take her to like baby classes. I guess like similar to people who, were shielding during COVID. But for me, it was everyone else was out doing things and I wasn't. Which it was really, really difficult. I had ended up with really bad postnatal depression during that time. And at the time, I didn't know that's what it was at all. Hadn't a clue that's what I was developing. I remember she was only maybe like 3 weeks old. And for the first time, I'd said to James, I was like, I'm going to go have some time to myself and have a bath and try and relax a little bit. And I remember lying in the bath and being like, what if I just like bolted out the door and never came back? Could I do that? And that was a genuine thing that went through my head. And I look back at it now and I'm like I felt that so strongly, that it almost like I didn't tell anyone I think I was about 3 years old when I said to James, I was like, I remember that. Like, I remember feeling like that. But at the time I was like, I can't tell people that. Like, I should be like telling everyone I'm just besotted with this baby and, I'm just going, it's so smooth and easy and I'm smashing it and I feel really good. But I wasn't. I was really unwell, like mentally and physically. There was another time I remember being like the baby, because so when your baby's 3 days old, it's like typically when mums can start to develop like baby blues. And I remember I cried all day when she was 3 days old and 4 days old and 5 days old. Like I just could not stop. I was crying when I looked at her because it was like so in love with her, but then I was crying at her a minute later because I was like, oh my God, but she's not my baby and there's been a mistake. Even though I, like, bear in mind, like, she was not away from me the whole time we were in hospital. Like, there was no separation at all. So that could not have happened. She even looked like me at that old, But yeah, it was really, really difficult. And then to obviously not have anyone apart from James, who was working really hard at the time to climb the ladder to support us, that there wasn't really anyone to lean on apart from him. And I felt like I couldn't lean on him. Well, I could lean on him, but I didn't want to lean on him and put a lot of, or even just tell him how I was feeling, because I felt really ashamed of how I was feeling. I had really bad intrusive thoughts as well, to the point where I was like, and if I walked down a flight of stairs, I physically could not walk down a flight of stairs without being convinced I was just going to trip and fall and die. Like I could see it happening in front of me every time I walked down. It was constant. Like if I was driving the car, I'm going to drive into that wall. Like, and there's nothing that, I can't not drive into that wall. It's just going to happen. And there's no, that's just the way it is. And it wasn't I wanted to die. it wasn't that. I wasn't feeling suicidal. It was just that I was so anxious and on edge and depressed that that's genuinely what I thought was happening. If I was cooking and I was using a knife to chop anything and Aria was like in her bouncer, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to trip and fall and this knife's going to go in her. But like genuinely, like what was going through my mind.
That's
And
what I was
then
gonna say. I was gonna say whenever you were going down the stairs, was she in your arms? And when you were driving your car, was she in the car? And is that why you were thinking it, or was it even when she wasn't with you, you were
um,
thinking this?
it was all the time. When she wasn't there, when she was there, it was just, it was like this constant, it was just constantly here, like the top in the front of my head. Like there was no way to ease off it, or and I just felt like no matter what I did or tried to distract myself, those thoughts were still there. And obviously I never would have hurt Ari intentionally or hurt myself intentionally, but the fear was there because I was so anxious that that was what was going to happen, and that was just the way it was, kind of thing. And again, like up until maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I would never have told anyone about this. I would have never turned around and said, this is how I feel. And because I was so ashamed of it and so felt so guilty for feeling like that, because I had this healthy, beautiful little girl and I should feel like the luckiest person in the world. But I didn't feel like that. And like, me well enough to know that even like I was always like a mummy hen. Like I always felt like I was a mum and I just didn't have a baby yet, like when I was in my 20s, and then to have her, I was like, God, like, this is amazing. Like, but it just didn't feel like that the whole time. And I feel like I missed out on so many things because I felt like that. And then when Ari was 6 months old, obviously I lost my best friend. She and my brother got married, and 11 days later she passed away. And that was like earth shattering for me, like tipped my world upside down. And I think it wasn't just losing her, it was losing, like it was watching my brother go through what he was going through, it was watching her family, my family, like it was watching even like my granny, like watching all their, the rugs being pulled from under their feet too, because it was such a traumatic thing to happen. So then after that happened, so I obviously had Aria, really bad postnatal depression, was diagnosed with like a life-changing disease that I was never, there's no cure, I'll always have it. I was still accepting that. And then 2 months later to lose Robin, it was just like someone had taken me and like tipped me upside down. If you know what I mean. I felt like the cows that you tip over and they go but someone just kept on tipping it upside down and wouldn't put up, you know what I mean? It was horrendous. Like yeah, it was a lot. And eventually, after a lot of convincing, being not convinced by people, because again, I wasn't really, at that point, I wasn't really sharing everything with everyone. I was just kind of pretending I was fine and getting on with it, and talking about, and like I would cry with my mum or cry with James, but in general, I would hold a lot of it down almost, because at that point I was like, no, I can't do this. I've got a little girl. I have to just get on with it. I wasn't really dealing with it. And then I'm not sure how old Aria was when I did go and see the GP, but eventually I went and saw the GP, and the only reason I went was because I saw a social media post, and I can't even remember who it was, which is awful because she's like probably it was like an influencer's post about how she was having intrusive thoughts and her anxiety was quite bad, and she went to the GP and started medication and it's helped her. And I was like, just then I was like, I need to go and do that. I need to go and see someone. I need to, have some therapy and get some medication. And I did, and I started sertraline, and it within, I'd say like the first 4 to 6 months, I was me again. I felt I wasn't, and I was worried that I would be like a robot and my emotions would be squashed down into like a little box and wouldn't be able to get out the same, or I didn't know what I thought would happen. But I'm still on them now. Ari is 5.5 and I'm still taking them, and I've lessened my dose now, but I couldn't come off them right now. Like if I miss a couple of doses I get heart palpitations still, but they've made a massive difference. And then recently I've got an appointment in January actually, to have an assessment done for ADHD because my GP and another professional I've spoken to have both said that they think it's a good idea for me to go and be assessed because of things I've explained and said. Just lots of little parts of my personality kind of it makes sense. Things I do and say, and that would make sense for me. I'm a very like all over the place person, and I've always been a really anxious person. I'm sure you remember. You might not, it might not be like at the forefront of, when you think of me, but at uni, I was so anxious about everything. Like, if someone was hurt, like, oh my goodness, they need to be admitted to hospital right away. Like, they're gonna die. There's no other way about it. Or like if somebody was being loud and I wasn't getting enough sleep, and you know I knew I needed to get this much sleep, or my whole day the next day would be a mess. And even if I wasn't that tired, it would still be a really bad day because I didn't have enough sleep. Like it was just I was just paranoid and anxious about every little thing, and I needed to have control over everything, and like the people around me, the situations around me, how I felt. But that was almost me kind of like trying to deal with those anxieties and those worries and concerns. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what to do or who to go to, because I just thought that, I've grown up like this, so that's me. That's the way I am. Nothing's going to change that. Like, didn't really think it was, there was more to it than that. Yeah, I think going through everything in such a short space of time was horrendous, but it also let me see a little bit more that, what I'm doing and how I'm reacting to things isn't completely normal. I know we all need help in certain situations, and I've seen lots of people around me go into really dark places, and they all need different, none of us are the same. Everyone needs something else, something different. We're all unique, we're all individual. When we're depressed, we're all a different kind of depressed. We all deal with those things differently, and the same with any other situation. Me saying that this works for me might not work for someone else, but I think taking that step and pushing yourself to go and look for that help is so important. And it is kind of hypocritical because at the time I didn't see it. I genuinely did not see it. And I'm sure it's the same for lots of people, lots of young mums, or lots of mums in general. They don't see it at the time. Or if they do, they ignore it and pretend it's not there because of the shame and the guilt around it. And being from Northern Ireland, that's like an extra sort of layer to it all, because it's not as prevalent and talked about as much. Or in Northern Ireland's very systematically get on with it. I know you've talked about it in some of the other podcasts and stuff, and especially for meals at home, it's absolutely horrendous because there's this systematic approach to dealing with males and females differently at home. If a girl, like when a little girl cries and falls, regardless of where you are, to be honest, it happens here as well in England. It's, oh, you okay? Let's have a little cuddle. If a little boy falls, up you get, dust your knees off, let's go. No, don't do that. There needs to be that. It's like whenever a child cries and I hear someone else say, oh, you're okay. They're not okay, they're crying. Help them, ask them why they're crying. I can see that you're sad. What do you want to tell me why? And at home, it's like that for adults as well. It's not just like that for kids. It's like male or female, struggle at home. It's like, oh, things are going to get better. You're fine. Don't, this is just temporary. It'll be fine tomorrow, or tomorrow's a new day, or no, like they need support. They need something more than that, than being told, oh, it's okay. Sure, we all go through stuff. We all deal with things in different ways, don't we?
Yeah.
But
Like I think it's interesting too that you've got a personal approach to it, but you've also got the professional approach to it. Like I was kind of listening, you were kind of jumping back and forward between the two, and obviously, like at that time, you might have been too involved in it to see. But can you look back now and be like, that was 100% normal to feel like that, or
yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well. All the feelings I felt, they might not be healthy feelings to have, or my mind wasn't in the best place, but they were normal and there were things that lots of people feel and lots of people struggle with. And I think that's partly why I was so invested in, like, with my, so I am now within an early years unit in a school. It's a wonderful small school. Like, Aria goes there, so she's at school with me. She's in year one now, so she's not in early years. But I was so, as soon as I got in, like, something I really wanted to make sure was heavily implemented into every single day was mindfulness with the children, because being aware of, like, how you feel and how other people feel is so vital. You know, emotional resilience. And if you don't have that foundation, you are going to struggle. You know, I would never go into school and look at the children's literacy and math and other areas. My priority would be their personal, social, and emotional development, their communication and language, their physical development, because without those prime areas, they're not going to build on the other areas. That's not going to happen. There's also, I think, looking at it as from a personal approach, but also mixed with that sort of professional approach to things. I would say that I feel like whenever you've had the sort of personal experiences working with children on top of that, and also seeing the benefit, they get from having their sort of personal and emotional and social development supported, you kind of see how those children who have those foundations already are excelling at those other areas. So whenever I did start in school, and I could see that, the school were really good at supporting those areas, that's something that they were really passionate about. And I just wanted to build on it a little bit with the littlest, the youngest ones. So, for example, before we broke up for half term, there was a session I'd done with them. And this is like something I would do with them on a regular basis. We were doing breathing techniques. There's one called lion's breath. And it is quite fun. You have to, like, stick your tongue out and like breathe out with your tongue out. I'm not doing it because you'll watch me doing that. But but I feel like there's fun the ways you can do these things, and there's ways you can make them engaging, and you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to have these, like, I wouldn't have had to go to uni to find out about how to learn about these breathing techniques. Like, anyone can do that, and for a child, like, it makes such a difference to them, and will impact their future. And so we do, like, yoga and meditation, listening to music, like, closing your eyes and thinking about how the music's making you feel. And we've got a massive push on discussing their emotions and how they feel and their worries. So obviously there's I'm not sure if have you seen the movie Inside Out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the movie's based on the 5 prime areas, the 5 main areas of emotion. So joy, anger, disgust. I'm trying to remember all the top of my head.
Sadness,
joy,
and
and
the purple guy's panic, is it? No, that's from
fear. Fear.
Panic's from Hercules.
Yeah. No, those are the 5. And then obviously off those are, like, all the secondary emotions. So under sort of joy, you could have, like, excited, or fear, you could have anxious and worried, and the school's approach to kind of supporting the children to understand those emotions in that way is wonderful, and it's being implemented more and more. And for me personally, going into somewhere that is doing everything they possibly can to support the children, like, for me as a parent and me as a colleague, gives me so much sort of, like, I don't feel worried about, obviously you worry about children, but I don't feel like I have to constantly say, well, why are we doing that? Why can't we do this? Or, I'm really lucky that the girl I work with, she's very much like, be kind to yourself, be kind to yourself. Like, she's amazing. Like, she manifests everything. She's wonderful. She's a very positive person. and she's made me a lot more positive in that environment, and a lot more confident, and because I'm working alongside someone else who feels like I do and has the same kind of views that children need these foundations. And yeah, she's very positive, and I think you need that. You need, I think negativity breeds negativity, doesn't it?
No,
And I feel
mostly.
quite lucky. Yeah, I think you need to be in that environment that that you're happy in. And I think money's money, isn't it? Money's money. Like, if you're not happy where you are and you're not working with people who respect you and give you the respect that you deserve, then you don't need to be there at all. But I think basically, if children aren't being taught how to regulate their own emotions, or not being taught how to calm themselves, and they're not being taught that they can tell their family or their teachers or the adults around them things that worry them, then that they need that. It's so important, like, to excel at anything, or to get anywhere at anything, or to be mentally and physically well. They need to know that there's someone there for them. They're not just going to get dismissed or told it's fine. What can we do to help you? What can I do to support you? I've noticed, like, one of the things the kids use, and when I got there, they were using it, and I remember Harry was there before I started, and one of the things, she came on one day, I was like, right, Harry, it's dinner time, and she was doing something, and she looked at me dead in the eye and put her hand out and went, "Stop it, I don't like it." And I was like, "Pardon?" like, what? But they use that as like that given consent. She was 3. From 3, those children are being told that if they don't like something, or something makes them uncomfortable. Now she's 5. She's very good at only using it. Like, if I'm tickling her, for example, this is just an example, and she says, "Stop it, I don't like it," I instantly stop. Like, I just step back. Granted, if she told me to stop before that, I would have obviously stopped, but she uses that because that's what she's been taught to use, in the school. And it's going to support her to feel strong enough to say no, as she gets older. It's that consent and body boundaries, and something makes you uncomfortable, then speak up. And I think giving children a voice is more important than anything else you can do for a child. If you can listen to them and support them, then you're doing everything right. Don't, just because they're little and they've got a little voice, don't dismiss that. That's so important. But I feel quite lucky that I've had the experiences I've had personally and professionally, even though some of the things I've experienced personally have been heart-wrenching. They've benefited me professionally as well, because I've been able to see and spot things that maybe someone else hasn't been able to, because I've been through it.
So it's a good thing that you think getting the kids to have voices and set boundaries, and do you think that will help in the future with mental health?
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively. And I think it's hard at the minute, because we're like a generation that does talk about mental health, but we've been brought up brought up by a generation who doesn't as much. And it is a slow process, but now, our generation, that's on their forefront. That's always at the front of their heads now, that they, and I think it's going to get easier and easier, and a more open dialogue, through each generation. That's going to be a massive thing. But it's hard for me, because I obviously have this view because I'm in a school in England, and what I've seen in settings in Northern Ireland, in educational settings and care settings, and I haven't been in one for a while now, but it was very different. It wasn't. It's not that it wasn't talked about. Obviously, they do talk about it at home and in schools, particularly. They are making a push, but there still seems to be a gap. There seems to be a gap, I guess, a massive gap. I do think that maybe the more, like I said, the more we go on, the easier the topic's going to become to push through and get out there. But I think without it, things aren't going to change. Things aren't going to get better. And hopefully, over here and at home, both keep taking those steps, and don't just think, oh, we've had enough now. That's but I do think as well, one of the things maybe a lot of parents will struggle with not being their generation is some of the language that's maybe used. Um, some of the things that are talked about in school with the children, because they're being taught it from a curriculum or taught it through mindfulness sessions or whatever, that maybe mum and dad, they wouldn't talk about it like that. That wouldn't be there. So it almost kind of jolts the progress. So I think more needs to be done in educating the parents of the children on the language and the processes and how things are dealt with, for anything to carry on moving forward. But yeah, I think things are going the right way, just maybe not quick enough.
And following on from that, you said that parents might be different. Can you think of things that could have been done when you were growing up in school or within a friend group or family, anything like that, that could have been different from your daughter, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky that I have two parents who, really love me and love James and love Aria, and Adam and I grew up in a really loving home. But because of that generational gap, talking about mental health and things like that, I didn't know, without getting too personal because it's not fair, that other people in my family were going through things. I had no idea, didn't have a clue, I'd never known any, not a word about it. Obviously, looking back now, I can see that that was the case, but at the time, I just thought, it is what it is. It was never a case, I've always been an anxious human. And I was always an anxious little girl. Like, there was no debating that. But it was just, she's a warrior. She carries a lot on her shoulders. And it was obviously a lot more. But because, again, of that gap between, of everything, that it wasn't picked up on the same. It was just, that's the way it is, and there's nothing can be done about it, kind of thing. But yeah, I think with Aria, I'm very much trying to, it's a hard balance to get that, between friend and parent.
It's probably a hard balance to get between parent and trained in it, because not all her, all her friends' parents are going to be teachers and stuff like that as well. So it's quite a weird balance.
And I think as well, I love the idea of this whole gentle parenting thing, but realistically,
you
there you go. It's a great summary.
I'll say it because you can't, because you work in a school.
I love them all, really, but to summarize, really, if you cannot say that you've never raised your voice at your own child at least one time, because I get really overstimulated with noise. If I get if she's climbing all over me, sometimes I'll have to be I'm really sorry, Aria, mummy needs 5 minutes. But there have been times where I've been Aria, I just need a minute, please just give me a minute. And the guilt you feel from that. But that's
how we grew up.
Well, yeah. Oh yeah, you go to your bedroom and don't come out for a while, go.
Just do my head in.
Yeah. But I do think as well, now, if there's this massive push on children need to share how they feel and tell you how they're feeling and blah 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 blah, but they also need time to figure out what they're feeling. If Aria's, the other day she turned around and said, just go back to Northern Ireland. That's literally what she said to me. I was like,
let you go back yourself?
Yeah, that I need to go back to Northern Ireland, because she was annoyed at me.
She just fully fledged English now, is she?
But she was like, I have an uncomfortable family life, right? And I was
At
And in
five
my
years
head,
old.
yeah, in my head, I was thinking, I'll show you what an uncomfortable family life is like.
But that's so good. Like, not to differ from your story, but I can't imagine being 5 years old and saying something like that. That's so like smart.
She said, no, it's not. It's sassy, okay?
I was, yeah, but I mean, even the language used, like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
come on leaps and bounds. Like,
But she, at that point, I knew already that I was like, okay, I think we need to have 5 minutes apart. Like,
mm,
we need to have 5 minutes and you need to calm down. And mummy needs 5 minutes also because mummy is quite cross. So, like, I think, I will give her the time to calm down and then we'll always go back. We'll always go back and talk about it just because she's happy and playing again. I would never be like, oh, I'll just leave her. I'm not gonna, I'll not bring it back up again.
mm,
It's not dealt with then, is it? It's just swept under the rug. So I'll always be like, shall we have a little chat about that? I'm here when you're ready, kind of thing. And even if she's having this, she feels big feelings a lot. She is getting a lot better at dealing with them. But there's times where she'll be like really cross and like she doesn't really shout or scream, but she's a crier and she's also a stomper and a slamming doorser. So at 5. So sometimes she'll be really in that moment of like just pure anger and she's just absolutely fuming with me, like she's point blank fuming. And I'll be like, you go and have some time in your room or in wherever she wants to sort of like de-stress a little bit. But I'll always say, like, how did you feel? This is how mummy felt. Is there anything else you want to tell me? I'll always give her those opportunities. And even if she's in somewhere and if she was kicking and screaming, I'd always be like, mummy loves you, but I'm just going to have a wee minute to, so she knows I'm there regardless. It doesn't matter how she behaves, how she acts, what she does. Mummy's always going to be there for her. Like, mummy's always going to give her that love and support. But sometimes she still has to realize that it's not acceptable to hurt other people or be unkind to other people. Like, there's always that line of, I don't want her to be a people pleaser, but I want her to feel
empathy.
yeah, and like just be kind. Sometimes it's a really hard line to walk on because of the pressure from lots of other people, and I've always been a people pleaser, and it's one of the things that I struggle with massively. So trying not to, trying to teach her that, she can say, she can say how she feels, and she doesn't have to prove herself to anybody else, but also don't be a dick. You know what I mean? Like, don't be a dick. Be nice. Be decent.
And do you see a difference between, like everyone says, it's like one of them Facebook memes. It's like I ask for something and my mom told me to wise up, but if my daughter asks me for something, mom buys her 50 of them, like that kind of thing. Do you see like a similarity between the way you were parented and the way Arya's grandparented, or do you think they're a lot more? I suppose because they never see her either. It's more like it is like a holiday, I suppose, whenever they get to see her.
Yeah, I mean the thing is with like they were here over the weekend, and I think I feel really lucky that whenever they are here, and they do come pretty often, they'll be over here quite regularly. It's obviously nothing like you would see if your grandparents lived at home, but it means when they are here, she's like
really good form.
Yeah, and they're all over her and she's all over them, and she's like, grandma, 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 granda, 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 like, it's constant. So it's hard to tell, I don't know what that would be like at home, but if there's things that with that, like, different generation, they speak differently and say things differently. Thankfully, mom and dad are very sort of open and they're
Do they find it weird the way she talks, and does she find it weird the way they talk? Not like the language they use. Like if she turned around to your mom and dad and said, "I have an uncomfortable family life," they might be like, "What are you teaching this child?"
what the flip have you taught her the day? Yeah, no, they They find it quite amusing, some of the language she comes out with, because she is very like, you know, like I remember her teacher came and told me one day that she was reading to her, and this was when she was 4, and she was like, that story was captivating. Do you know, she's there. She uses big words quite often. She's like a little old woman sometimes. But I think they find, I mean, watching them with her, like, it's just the best thing ever. But there are times where maybe like, my dad would be like, "Oh, Granda needs a hug or a kiss. He's feeling sad." I'd be like, "Don't say that." And he's not saying that in any which way. He doesn't see what I would see in that, saying something like that. Whereas, I've always, if there's anything that I don't like, I'll always say, "Listen, this is why I don't like that. I don't like that because you're making her feel like
she has to be obliged to give you."
Yeah, yeah. And like if she doesn't want to hug or kiss you, that's okay. Just leave it at that. It's not. And he doesn't do that. It's not something that's like underpinned in their relationship. He's not there. Like I think he did it once and he's never done it again. When I explained, because it was done for him, so it was. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't see maybe what I see in it. Well, he didn't see what I see. He understood it when I explained. So I think there's always that sort of, if it's not explained to you and it's not made clear, then you can't expect someone else to know. But my mum's very, very good at listening, and to her, and there maybe are differences to how I was raised and how they are speaking to her kind of thing. And there's huge differences between my mum and dad, how they raised me and how I raise Ari. And it's not because mum and dad did anything wrong. It's just that research and progression is there for a reason, isn't it?
Yeah. Do they disagree with you sometimes?
I think my mum's never said it openly, but me and my dad are really close. Like he is like, I'd say my dad's one of my best friends in the world. We're really, really close. And there's been times he'd be like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that." And I'd be like, "Well, I do that because," and then he's like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." There's never like a case of like, "Oh, you can't do that." And my mum, she understands. It's like, for example, my mum and dad never did this, but that was just their personal opinions. But everyone back whenever I was little would have been left to cry to sleep.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think during my masters, I did some research on it and I wrote a paper on it. And
what was it called? To meet the parents, self-soothing or something?
Self-soothing, yeah.
Self-soothing.
But I was very much like, I will never do that, and this is why I will never do that. And a few people were like, "Oh no," like because she was a shit sleeper. Like, oh my god, like. I rocked her to sleep until she was about 18 months old, and everyone was like, "Why are you still doing that? Why are you still doing that?" And I remember the first night I put her in her bed without rocking her to sleep, and she looked at me and she smiled at me, and I was like, "Love you." She was like, "Love you." And I walked out the room, turned her light off, shut the door, and she went to sleep. And whereas if I tried to do that 2 months before, and I did try and do that, put her down, she was awake, left the room shut, I cried instantly. So I was straight back in, didn't even hesitate to pick her up and rock her and put her back to sleep. But when she was ready, she was ready. She felt secure, she felt safe. She knew that if she was crying, I'd come to her. There was no doubt in that. And I think there was this massive sort of like, I felt ashamed to tell people that I was still rocking her to sleep because everyone else was like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You need to do what works for you. The priority is what works for the child." Like, I know this is very opinionated and it might not be the best thing to say, but I'm going to say it. I think as long as you're doing your best for that child and you're listening and you're not just doing it because someone else did it and that child's okay, because that's not how life works. That child might be lucky enough to be okay, but this one might not be. If as long as you're listening to that child and you can hear, they don't need to talk to tell you how they feel, then that's what's important. I feel like there's a lot of, if there's someone says to you, or someone tries to give you advice and you don't agree with it, that's okay. But it's really important to do your own research, and like Google's great, you know? Like if you need some support, or if you need help with something, or you're unsure, that's okay too. Like it's okay to ask. And I think we have this shame, like don't make mums feel like they can't ask questions. You know, it's okay. Like I felt like I was going to know everything when I had Aria because of my degrees and like my time working with kids in nurseries. And but I had her and was like, Jesus Christ, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. You may as well have handed me a monkey because I know nothing. Like, you know, you can have all the qualifications and experience in the world, but that individual child is very different from the next at the end of the day. I think I think things are changing just a bit. They're getting there. Maybe a
And do
bit slower.
and do you think it's just like in your school, is that a curriculum all over England, or is it something that your school does?
Yeah, so like PSE is a massive part of the curriculum in England. Early years, it's obviously slightly different for a number of reasons, because the curriculum is based around the child rather than it being, you know, like we would always say our curriculum is the child because, you know, we teach them what we feel they need, and that's up until they're 5. And then in the main school, it's embedded in everything. And they all have, like, it was yoga day at the start of September, and we had like someone come in and teach some of the older children. They have them every year. Yoga, we have first aid. So all the kids and every single child in the school learns first aid every year. And there's lots of things to help support them as an individual rather than their education, you know, because without those initial things, their education will suffer. But as far as like the nursery environment's concerned and reception's concerned, it is part of like every single day, you know. Every almost every day after lunchtime I'll be like, okay, let's do some mindfulness. And it's important to call it mindfulness, you know, let them know this is why we're doing this. We're doing this because it's going to help us, you know, giving them that. Even though they're only 3 or 4 or 5, they still got these huge brains, these little sponges that are going to take everything in and be able to link it back as they get older. Making those links for them is so important. But yeah, they even, you know, for the staff too. I delivered a meditation session in our staff meeting maybe like 6 weeks or so ago, roughly, and it was really good. And the reason I did it with the staff, because it's a transferable skill, isn't it? If you can do that at home, it benefits you loads, but that then benefits the kids, and you can also teach the kids then, you know, in your environment. But I think it's one of the most important parts of the curriculum. Without it, the children wouldn't have the foundation that they've got. It's called the early years foundation stage because it's the foundation for everything, isn't it? You know, of their education, of their lives.
Communication, feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if they feel like they can't tell you how they feel, how can you then support them in any which way? They don't feel like they can go to you, or they don't feel like they can trust you, they're probably not going to learn a lot from you because they're not going to want to listen. They're not going to want to come to you or learn from you, or, you know, just come for some comfort or anything. They're not going to want to do that. But yeah, I feel like as a mum, I'm lucky enough that I'm able to transfer skills onto Aria that, you know, I wasn't taught when I was little. But again, it is just because times are different, you know. When I was younger.
It is true though, like it's come on leaps and bounds. Like even in terms of we were actually having a discussion the other day about the likes of ADHD and autism and that kind of thing. And I was like, it just wasn't like, I remember in primary school there was this one guy that had to be supervised at all times. And he was obviously very like he was unwell, if that's a correct term to use. I don't know if it is. But he was like, I remember him walking around just cursing at everyone and just very standoffish. And I get a lot of people were scared of him. But when you were that age in school, you just thought, oh, he's a bad bugger, isn't he? Like he's, whereas now you would look at that and be like, well, he's obviously suffers from X, Y, and Z. And even the something as simple as like my cousin is 18, 19, and she's, let me get this word right, is it dyscalculia? It's like dyslexia for math.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah.
Is it
I think you're right. I
dyscalculia?
think it is dyscalculia.
And
Yeah.
I definitely have that 100%. I was awful at maths, and it's until I worked in retail and I read numbers and they got read to me, and it would say like someone was reading it to me or I was reading it off a page and it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would go into my head as 9, 4, 6, 5, 2, and it's mad that that was picked up for my some of my cousins' age, 10, 11, 12 years younger than me, and it probably should have got picked up
Mm.
when even something as simple as that. And then like I look now at like mental health, like I was miserable in school, and I didn't do well in school. Not that I did do well in the subjects I liked, but the subjects I didn't like, I didn't give a shit about
Yeah.
because I didn't give a shit. And like I'm kind of picking up on what you said about they're not, if you're not going to learn from them if they don't respect you and they can't communicate with you, and if they're not in the right mind space, that kind of thing. Like I agree with that completely because I just know I could have done, like I look back now and I'm like I could have done so much better, but I just wasn't in the mind frame. And it was, I don't know how it wasn't picked up in any school. And I know like my parents are the same. They just kind of don't really talk about it. They got better now, to be fair. But back then, 20 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm depressed. And they were just, oh, you're grand. It's just hormones or it's just, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's not shitting on them. It's just the way they were brought up and the way they had social circles that wasn't talked about either. And it's just like it's just so good to hear from yourself that it is being picked up so young to learn how to
Yeah.
communicate properly and how to express your emotions. And hopefully it does progress over to here in Scotland and Wales because it is. I would like looking at my nephew now, like you were sitting talking about Ari and talking about other kids, and I was constantly thinking of him. And I was like, I would like him to be able to express himself and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And it's good that, do you think over in Northern Ireland, especially, they do have things put in place that it's more structured than when we were young, but it just isn't as cemented as England? Or do you think it's still got a long way to go?
Um, I mean, obviously, I've lived over here now for like what 10 years because
10 years.
10 years since we were at uni.
Yeah. Big reunion coming soon.
I know, but I feel like when I look at maybe like my friends at home and some of their children and another thing that there are definitely visible gaps. I think it's very different saying, "Oh, we had a mindfulness day." And having it every single day and embedded into every single thing, and I think that that's sort of like where things need to go. It needs to be a daily occurrence. It needs to be encouraged, like having a token day or one token thing, that's not enough. And hopefully those gaps will close and things will start to, I think, obviously more and more training now is available in mindfulness and is available within mental health and neurodiversity and other things. And I think the more that's kind of taken in and pushed out, it's going to benefit the staff and the children in schools and in other areas, parents as well. There's so many free resources for parents, so many free resources out there for parents to get support, whether it's that they're worried about a child, whether they just want to learn a little bit more themselves. It's there, it's available, it doesn't cost anything. It's understandable. It's not like reading a journal article. Like it's there and it's written for parents or it's written for the children or so I think, as long as there is that want to learn or want to know or want to find out about these things, then it's more than available for people. And you were saying about obviously someone in school, you know, maybe was what wasn't hitting those developmental milestones, or wasn't, you know, it was untypical. Those behaviors were untypical. It's the same. Even now it's a lot better, but with like girls on the spectrum, you know, they
It's harder to find in girls, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, their symptoms, what they would sort of show, or it's very different. That girls are very good at masking, in public spaces, and then having these massive meltdowns at home, and children are in school and out in public typically a lot, sort of, if you could call it, better behaved, but a lot calmer and a lot more like obedient or malleable, in those environments, because they don't feel safe, and there's almost this like anxiety factor around, and everyone has anxiety about things, including children. Like that we've all got our anxieties, and children feel it in a different way, regardless of whether they need extra support with their mental health or not. So whenever children do go home, their behaviours are very different. Like, I can assure you, my child would not be telling her teacher she has an uncomfortable school life.
It'd be worse if she was telling her teacher she had an uncomfortable home life.
Well, I
I know,
actually told the teacher, she said that to me, so she's prepared and get shit up.
I know it's my mum always says about my sister too, not the one with the baby, the younger one. Like, her reports were glowing, and then she came home and she was the biggest wee shite ever. My mom was like, "Who is this child?
Yeah.
She's not my daughter."
Yeah, and it's supposed to be like, if a child is acting out in front of you and at home, it's because they feel safe and you're their safe person, and you're like, oh jeez, I wish I wasn't for 5 minutes. Like, give me a break. You know what I mean?
Not much of a compliment, is it?
Yeah. But that's what it is. And for children who are, for girls who are on the spectrum, their meltdowns are so intense, and they struggle with so many things behind closed doors, because they feel that social pressure of having to mask and having to act a certain way. And I've heard children like pick up accents from their friends, or
TV shows.
Oh gosh, yeah. But
I remember a girl I used to work with having like an American accent, but she was from Liverpool, and she said, "Oh, I watched Cartoon Network so much when I was a kid," and she sounds American. But she admitted, like, she was very good. Like, she admitted, she was like, "Oh, I am autistic." She just came out and said it, which was very refreshing as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, being able to talk about it so openly, like, that was never, when I was younger, I would never have told anyone that like I was being assessed for ADHD, because good grief, oh my goodness, that's just shocking. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, well, never. Just like, and I know lots of other people that have been through it recently, or going through these assessments that were missed when they were younger, because
so readily available.
Yeah, and for girls, the signs are very different. Very different than boys. Like, I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm like super hyperactive, but I am a babbler and a talker, and I do get my thoughts muddled, and that, if you read something I'd put down on paper, you'd be like, you didn't write that, because I've been able to go back and edit that and write that and put that down in a way that makes sense. But when I'm speaking, yeah, I don't have a filter. Like, there's no filter in my mouth. There's a filter on Microsoft Word. You can delete things and edit them and fix them. But yeah, I think there's lots and lots of things I think are to come, but things are looking good now, and just have to keep going that way. Keep pushing and keep encouraging,
and to bring it back to, you said for years you felt like you couldn't talk about how you felt about the intrusive thoughts and that kind of thing. What was there kind of a stage where you felt like you could, or was it whenever you started seeing the doctor and that kind of thing, or what gave you the confidence to finally speak out?
Whenever I got to the other end of that tunnel, I think the Kim sort of was starting like to come out of that kind of like darkness, was when I looked back and went, oh my good grief, like I actually felt like that, and I felt ashamed of that, and I shouldn't have felt ashamed. Do you know that that was massive, and it was a really important moment for me in recovering from
So much.
the, yeah, being able to openly say I felt like this, and it's okay. It's okay that I felt like this. I shouldn't feel ashamed of that. But because no one else was saying it, everyone was like, oh, like, you'll be such a good mummy. Like, you're going to be amazing. Like, I bet you can't wait. And I couldn't when I was expecting her. I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to be like the best mum ever. Like, so good at it. But in actual fact, like, and you know what, I do feel like I am a good mum, and I have doubts and I have loads of mum guilt about lots of things. But I think you kind of end up in that situation where if you are told so many times that this is the way something's going to be for you and it's not, you feel like you're letting everyone down, you know? I felt like I couldn't tell anyone that I was feeling all those things because everyone was telling me like I'm gonna do so well, and I remember my mum saying to me, your whole life's gonna change, like your whole world's gonna turn upside down. And she was the only one that was fully honest with me about how hard it was going to be. And everyone else kind of at the time was like, oh, don't get me wrong, it can be hard, it can be hard. But it was the hardest thing and the best thing I've ever done was having a baby. The hardest thing. I mean, labour was easy. Raising the kid, no. But yeah, I think I'm finally getting to that point now, 5 years on, that I can see what I'm good at, and I can be proud of myself for things that I found really hard to be proud of before, because I was basically on the floor. There was nothing left of me. I was just like crumbs, do you know? But slowly I've been able to get back up and push myself and like get through things and cry when I need to cry, and I write things down now and rip them up if I'm cross. You know what I mean? Like there's techniques I use and lots of different things I do that help me, that might help other people, or they might need some other, something else that might help them, because we all are so different. Being able to talk about it has been a massive part of why I've improved so much and why I feel like I've been able to move past all, as much as you can move past traumatic event. But yeah, I feel very grateful that I've got what I've got, I've got to where I've got to. I've got a really wonderful, enthusiastic, beautiful, infuriating little girl.
So you're going to talk about James there?
Yeah. I've got I'm obviously like, I'm getting married soon, and I've got a little prick of a dog, and I've got a beautiful home, but none of that would be enough if I was mentally struggling as much as I was. That's what makes the difference. I could be living in a cardboard box and my mental health could be incredible, and then I would be fine, wouldn't I? Because if I'm happy, I'm happy, and that's it. That's the be all and end all of it. Like, if I feel secure and supported and happy, then no matter where I am or what I'm doing, I'll be okay. Being able to give Aria those skills and support her like that, to know that no matter what, as long as she's feels that there's someone there, then she'll be okay too. And that's that. I'm lucky that James is very good too. He gives me the space I need when I need it and supports me with what I need, and so I do. I feel loved and lucky, and whereas this time 4 years ago, even I would have been just like a wreck. Well, I would have pretended I wasn't now. 100%. I would have been like, oh, I'm fine. 100%. Like, no, I don't think anyone can ever be 100%. Like, But yeah, you'll like this though. We got to the cinema today to go see Trolls. Opened the car door. Ari came out and went, "We're sucking diesel now."
She cannot pretend that she's English and say something like that.
Says stuff like all the time.
Be nuts corner, baby.
Oh no, she's funny. Like she is funny. But yeah,
You touched on it a wee bit there, but I think it's maybe because maybe if you've listened to my other podcasts that I always end the podcast asking whenever you're feeling down and feeling like you're not yourself or not on 100%, what advice would you give people that makes you feel better?
to be kind to yourself, be honest with yourself, and go to someone that you trust and just tell them, because if they love you and they care about you, they're going to help you. They're going to support you. It could be something that you've gone to them about 45 times that week. That's okay. And I think there's always help out there. There's lots of places you can go for it, that you can look for it. And I know sometimes you don't want to. You don't feel like you can do that. And if you can't, get a bit of a pen and paper out and write down how you feel. That's helped me so much. Like being able to write my feelings down if I feel like I can't share them with anyone else in that moment. And then maybe if I can a week later tell someone, I'll tell them. But at that time, if I'm, just to get it down and get it out, just get it, to see it in front of me or to feel it being written down in that sense, it helps massively. But, go to your GP if it's really, if it's a continuous thing and it's not going away, and it, that anxiety is like taking over things in your life that maybe they wouldn't any other time. Like I said, we all get anxious about things, don't we?
Well, thanks very much for talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
A nice wee catch up.
Awesome.
Anyone negatively affected by this week's episode, there are a number of links in the bio to help. That's all from me. I will see you next week on That's Mental Mate.